old days, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. So Mika, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
That's my pleasure, mate.
The idea, just so our students know, is for you to just summarise a few things from your professional perspective.
Yeah.
For those students who are watching on, I've been seeing chiropractors for years and years, since 17 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I trust in very few chiropractors. Not that I think that there's anything wrong with them or their understanding. We just haven't built a relationship, and I just don't trust them with my body. I trust you wholeheartedly with my body now.
Man,
and
I'm honoured.
I do feel like you approach the human body in your very specific way, but you are able to help me understand what we are trying to achieve together, rather than going to a chiropractor and a chiropractor doing something and saying, see me again next week, without me even knowing what on earth we've just done.
Yeah, exactly.
And educating people in what they're paying their hard-earned money for is so important.
Absolutely.
And so I appreciate that from you. And
no, I really appreciate you being very kind with your comments.
That's why I wanted our students to learn a little bit from you. And you're local also, so the students who are watching, Mika is based in Shepperton. You'll find the link at the bottom of the description. So when I first spoke to you, Mika, about movement and mobility, etc., one of the first things you introduced me to was the athletic diamond.
Yes.
So help us understand what the athletic diamond means. It is a diamond that represents every facet of our health, is that correct? Physical health?
Yeah, physical, emotional, mental, even chemical. It all kind of depends on how far you want to take it, really. So if you think about it like this, if you go to a jewelry shop and you find the most expensive diamond you can in that shop, so it's going to be beautiful. Every facet is beautifully honed and chiseled down and polished, and it's just lovely, isn't it? Now, so that's probably your top athletes are like that in any field, any sport. So all their different attributes are near enough perfection, if you like. That's what gives you world records. That's what keeps you going year on in. So you don't pick up injuries, and you don't therefore lose training days, and therefore suffer in competition. Now, so when you compare the pros to, say, the Sunday hackers, or people who are not athletic at all, all of a sudden the diamond becomes a lot less attractive. So a lot of those facets, a lot of those different attributes, which may stand for endurance, power, strength, elasticity, flexibility, mobility, agility, coordination, throw in the chemical stuff, throw in the emotional stuff, that diamond is just a lump, right? And it's not going to be really worth much money. So in that sense, the more you kind of look at yourself and your system holistically, the more you're able to address all those different facets, the better your body will function.
So in terms of someone being athletic, most people just think, oh, I'm not athletic, but I always say if you run after the kids, if you run after the ice cream van, if you carry shopping, you're moving athletically.
Oh, absolutely.
In a way that your body perhaps is not designed to do, but we do these things as part of our everyday behaviour.
I think au contraire. I think the body is designed to do all of that.
Okay.
I think it's completely designed to do all of that, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't be able to do it.
Sure.
And we would be literally picking up injuries all the time, and hence live a very short and unfulfilling life, I would think.
So the fact that we pick up these injuries is because we don't train enough of these facets of our athletic diamond.
Yeah, various different attributes.
Okay, so to help us understand some of the attributes that contribute towards this diamond, as you said, they would be flexibility, strength training, coordination, balance, etc. So flexibility, stretching, or yoga would just contribute towards this athletic diamond.
Oh, absolutely, it will. And so it would diverge a little bit from, strictly speaking, yoga. But for example, I get a lot of runners. I see runners in my clinic all the time, and they have running injuries, right? Because they do nothing but run. So it's very predictable what kind of injuries they will have.
Sure.
And then you try and tell them, okay, it'd be a good idea for you to do some yoga, do some stretching, do some strength work, a bit of conditioning, maybe climb a few trees. And they look at me like, they're horrified, right? I'm a runner, I mustn't do anything like that. That's nonsense. But actually, what it really boils down to is that, again, like all the top athletes in the world, they cross train extensively. So you have your top footballers, they do their Pilates, they do their yoga, they do all these kind of other things that on the surface of it have nothing to do with football, right? But they have all to do with the infrastructure. So in a way, the more you are athletically able, the more your brain will allow you to function, and the higher performance you can put out as it goes.
We have the same with yoga. Yoga injuries are so predictable with people who do nothing but yoga.
Yeah, exactly. You see a person who complains of a thing A, by looking at them that they spend all their day sitting at a desk, then they drive a bit for the commutes, and then they sit at home watching television. And then they come into yoga class once a week and they think, right, I'm going to be whatever else.
Yeah, I know So just not kind of sidetracking off the athletic diamond, there are a few of our students who do a lot of running and can't get their head around why they're the outside of their hip. I'm trying to keep it kind of simple for people to understand.
Yeah, totally.
Why these muscles to the outside are so much tighter relative to some of the other muscles. So we have a student who runs, she can do front splits quite happily. Yeah. And then when it comes to her turning the hip outwards, the glute medius, etc., all a little bit tight, and doesn't understand why they would be tight, despite what I might say. If you say a few things, she might listen.
Okay, so if she runs a lot, again, then we have to look at the running mechanics, and also pre-existing history of injuries. So a typical reason I would say why the lateral aspect of the legs and the hips is tight is because a person lands badly when they run. So they don't land soft and square on the foot with a relaxed foot, but they oftentimes land on the outside of the heel with a bit of a heel strike.
Interesting.
And what that does, it sends essentially a torsion force through the knee. That then causes, again, a compensation to happen around the hip. Maybe this athlete has had ankle sprains in the past, potentially due to the way they land or for other reasons, I don't even know. But oftentimes that is then the case where the brain has to utilize the hips to take up the slack, if you like.
Sure. Could that still happen with someone who lands perfectly, just the overuse of the hips?
Well,
the outside hips.
Yeah. Well, then again, it can. That's a very typical scenario. I mean, then we'd have to get into the nitty-gritty and figure out, okay, how is the heel actually aligned? Is it sitting beautifully? And what's their preference, I suppose? See, if a person who has had a history of landing badly and they all of a sudden start landing better, but they don't address the other issues with it. Okay. So they don't actually remind the brain that it's okay to utilize the sort of main stabilizing muscles. So they're still relying heavily on the glute medius and all those lateral stabilizers. So the job is incomplete, essentially.
Okay. So runners can create problems, firstly by not faulty technique, but just kind of a little bad habit perhaps that they've picked up as they've gone along, and then repeating that continuously. But that's also right. If you have good technique, the simple fact that you repeat that action so regularly and it becomes the core of your athletic diamond,
that's right,
that can still create an injury or an issue. So the idea for the runner is for them to do additional movements to address balance, coordination, flexibility, etc.
Yeah, absolutely right.
The same way a yoga person, their athletic diamond is made up of yoga. Yeah. And they just need to do a few additional things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the important thing, I guess, and this is something that you said once, which really reminded me of the kind of the terminology we use sometimes with people, is that I'm telling them that if they want to move better, move more athletically, they need to do this. But actually, just telling them that if they improve their athletic diamond, they're just reducing their risk of injury. Yeah. And it appeals to people when you say we're reducing the risk.
Yeah, absolutely. But on this topic though, I was just reading, I was doing an exam about some sports chiropractic certification, and in there was a little paragraph that said about strength and conditioning training, basically, and how that is actually considered one of the best forms of preventative sports medicine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And this is from a research paper where they propose this kind of thing, and I'm thinking, you know what, that is so true. Because you don't want to wait for an injury to happen. That's quite silly in a way. No, instead, you look after your infrastructure, you make sure you got all your ducks in a row, and then you're safe in your knowledge that you are strong enough, you're capable enough, you're able, and your brain will then go, no, you know what, rock on, son, do your thing, you'll be fine, right? So that's kind of it's not really in maybe it's not in our culture at this point to kind of look after yourself and pay attention. Maybe it's seen as a bit weird.
Yeah, or a bit selfish. It's
yeah, maybe selfish.
Yeah, sure.
But that's a whole nother philosophical can of worms. That is, man.
We don't want to go there.
Yeah, maybe that's for another day.
We'll get sidetracked. So, the knee joint.
Yeah, go on.
Knee joint has always fascinated me. It almost appears to me as if our knee joint, although a really fantastic design, is not the ideal design for the demands we place on the body nowadays with what we do. Like, we've evolved, and our body's slowly trying to catch up. Could you explain just in kind of layman's terms the basic kind of anatomy of the human knee and what it's designed to do and what movements can create unnecessary stress?
Okay, so let's put it this way. So you have your tibia, which is of course your shin bone. It sits like that. Then you got another bone, which is your femur, that comes to meet it like that. So they meet pretty much bang head on. Now it's a congruent joint, so that means that funny enough, the knuckles or the bits of the knuckles, they kind of match even in the knee. So you have certain ridges in there to kind of stop the unwanted excessive rotation. Now the knee really is a hinge joint, so it's supposed to do movement very much like so, to allow, of course, the flexion extension of the knee. And that's what it's very good at. That's what knee really is superb at doing. Now, of course, it allows certain amount of rotation, it allows certain amount of lateral flexion, but again, so you have strong ligaments on either side, the collateral ligaments, to try and, again, curb that enthusiasm a little bit. Now, the knee in itself is a robust piece of kit, but it can't handle it when there's from other sports, when you have sudden accelerated forces onto the outside or the inside of the knee, then you start getting collateral ligament injuries, meniscal injuries, that kind of thing. In yoga, because yoga is quite slow, you kind of have to go out of your way to bully your knee, should we call it?
It does happen.
Yeah. So people kind of they just don't listen to their bodies. They don't allow themselves to regain this or to gain this mobility organically. So there's I suppose the biggest thing there is impatience, trying to get to that textbook finish.
So also part of our early days, we don't understand the concept of pain. We don't know it's telling us something.
Yes.
We're not quite sure what that sensation is.
Yes,
if I'm trying to get my foot into lotus and my hip it no longer moves and I'm trying to do it, all I'm doing is twisting my knee, and I'm not sure what that is that I'm feeling. So
yes, absolutely.
Part of it may be just inexperience and not really knowing how everything feels.
So yeah, absolutely. So is that not being familiar with your body? Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you start anything. If you wanna start playing the violin, to begin with, it probably will sound horrendous, and you will get sore fingers and this and that, and maybe a bit of neck pain and shoulder ache because you're just trying to keep on at it. But as we practice, you get more refined.
Yeah, that's a really a great analogy, because you hear people all the time saying they don't do yoga anymore because they hurt their knee or something. I said, how many classes did you do? They'd be like 1 or 2. Yeah. So like, if you played violin, you would.
Bad.
Oh, I don't do violin.
Yoga must be bad for you.
Violin's dangerous.
Yeah.
It always hurts my neck.
The most dangerous sport in the world, playing the violin, man.
So that's a really good point. Anything that you learn, that the brain and nervous system is trying to adapt, and
that's right.
If there is any discomfort or pain, is it likely that the brain is just telling you that you perhaps exceeded your tolerance for today, and that you should somewhat ease off? I
think that's a perfect way of putting it. See, so you got different. I suppose you can have different gradings of pain as well.
Yeah,
so it starts from a little heads up, hello, little niggle, and then it kind of mounts up. If you ignore that, it mounts up to a bit more, so it becomes a bit more substantial, maybe slightly sharper quality of pain. You ignore that, still keep pushing it. Then next thing you get is more like a burning sensation type of thing, where something feels like it's almost ripping. Some people still choose to ignore that. They keep pushing, and next thing you know, it's a full-on, all-out agony. And a lot of us, we don't expose ourselves to those little things often enough.
Sure.
So kind of know where the limit is.
Sure. So we're just
learning. It's easy to go past the limit.
Okay. So really early days, a student getting into yoga, getting into poses that they've never seen before, done before.
Right.
You need to find a way to listen to what your body's saying. And this is what I try and teach people about internalization.
Yes.
That if you're too busy listening to the loud pop music being played, and if you're looking in the mirror and looking at what your neighbour is doing, you're not going to be able to listen to what your body's telling you.
That's right.
That's what we need. So a question, the meniscus, which is like the cushioning, the padding that sits between the two main bones that make up the knee. I have read contrary reports and studies, as always, as you'd imagine, that the meniscus is under the least amount of stress when the joints are both, when the bones are both pressing on each other evenly, as you described with the knuckles.
Yeah.
The most amount of stress the meniscus is under when there's a slight bend as it moves forward, and the distribution of your weight is uneven. So I've read that a slight bending of the knee or a micro bend when you're lifting weights is actually worse for your meniscus than you're better off going further. Is that, what do you think of that?
Well, let's put it this way, for a static yoga pose, I reckon if you're doing a static variation of yoga, you're holding a pose for quite a long time, I'd reckon, locking knees is probably the most efficient way of doing it.
Is that because it's energy efficient also? Because it allows
both.
Okay.
So like we discussed a long time ago about mastery and that. I think you mentioned that in your book as well. But mastery is when.
Hang on, you heard about a book?
I have heard about your book.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of your book. Hence, I'm probably your number one salesman.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I'm telling everybody about it.
The commission checks in the post.
Yeah, thank you. Brown envelopes in the post. But yeah, so what was I talking about?
My book. No, meniscus. The knee. In that, it's probably okay for you to straighten or lock your leg.
Yeah, exactly. Because when it comes to mastery, mastery happens when effort ceases, right? So if you're straining in a yoga pose, that means you're expending unnecessary energy. You are causing damage to some degree or the other. So of course there are different levels of mastery. But if you learn to stand in a very good position, which I believe is one of the yoga poses, funny enough, but just standing up tall. I mean, it's actually not very easy to stand still for more than a minute or so.
Yeah.
Most people get very fidgety because they haven't mastered standing up. So they're inefficient in their bodies, their energy, their joint positioning, their muscles, everything. So when you apply that concept then again to more advanced yoga poses, there's time and place for pushing it. And pushing for that extra stretch, if you like, that allows you to go deeper into the pose, and that's great. But that's not all the time. So if you spend every single minute of every yoga class you go to on the edge, like where you're grinding your teeth and you're going, this is killing me, you're not going to enjoy it. And then you end up like your friend who decided yoga was bad after 2 classes, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you allow yourself the comfort and the solace and the serenity that comes from finding a position and finding mastery in that position, whether it's the textbook finish or not, that doesn't even matter.
Sure.
But with time, it gets better and better. You can go further into those poses as the aforementioned neurological and physiological adaptation takes place. Sure. If that answers your question anyway.
Yeah, not completely, but yeah.
Yeah, well go on, what's unclear?
It's not so unclear, it's the idea that, and it started a long time ago in the gym world, everything that I was being taught, it was soften your knees. And in certain positions I kind of understood, but in other places I was like, it's actually more difficult. I'm expending too much energy. Because if you're, I've written this in my book, no one waits for a train with their knees bent.
Yeah.
Because you're wasting energy, the muscles are working. You straighten the legs.
Because you're being static.
Exactly. So if you're doing certain exercises and you're isolating certain parts, you want to be as energy efficient as possible if that's the goal. So this whole movement of micro bending and slightly bending the knees has come into place, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I guess I just want our students to see that there's contrary information available, so they can make their own.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, you know what? See, I think the micro bend, I think it's more of a dynamic thing. So, but I mean, if you're doing a yoga class that is more dynamic, you're just flowing from one pose to another, then all of a sudden it becomes very counterintuitive to actually lock your knees back.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Right? So same as if you're doing any other sport, for example, where you're changing direction, you're going from one plane of movement to another, no, you can't afford the time to actually lock your knees back and switch off your stabilization system.
Sure, it's a really good point.
So that's kind of where I really see the application for the micro bend. But I mean, again, if you think about, say, a footballer, or if they're in the match, there's very little time for them to actually stand there going, yep, I'm just going to lock my knees back. They're busy going this way and that way as the game advances. So they're constantly in a micro bend.
Because it's preparing you.
Yeah, so you're constantly agile. And my old football coach, he was always give us a telling off and sometimes a bit of a slap on the wrist if he saw our heels touching the ground. But really? He said, if you're on your heels, you're dead. You can't move, right? You can't move fast. So whereas in a yoga class where you don't have nobody's coming at you or there is no like that, then that's fine. That's
if you are isolating a pose for a period of time, because some classes are quick, but if you're doing a static pose,
then I think
there should be no problem or no reason why.
No, it's a resting position essentially, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. The biggest issue with the knee in yoga, interestingly, relates to the hip. When people don't have enough external or outwards rotation of the hip, if they're trying to do lotus pose,
yes,
the problem then catches up on their knee because they're trying to twist the knee, as I mentioned earlier.
That's right.
The hip has been a real battle for me in terms of my investigation, trying to understand, can we gain more than 60 or 70% external rotation? So you and I, with the hips we have today, say we've grown up and we haven't been doing yoga as children and we've been doing male sports, running, just
man
kicking
sport.
anything,
exactly, hitting things
without any awareness whatsoever, just Neanderthals that we are. Can we now improve our external hip rotation? Can we gain more than 60 or 70% that we have? What do you think?
Yes, but it takes a lot of work. See, it's funny you mentioned the hips that we have, because I have very mismatching hips myself, right? So my left one is good, that's fun. I don't know why, but I'm sitting like this, but I just happen to find that comfortable today. But if I try and do that with the right, what happens is that my wire's getting caught. But yeah, the right one just about gets in the right position now. But I had 2 operations on my hip when I was a kid. And what that meant that I had a very, very stiff hip for a long time. I could never sit cross-legged. Until one day I kind of had enough and I thought, okay, I need to sort this stuff out. And I started consciously stretching it, and I didn't really know what I was doing then.
Okay.
But I thought, you know what, if you're stretching, it must be good. And now, I'm able to now sit, cross-legged. Yeah, exactly. I mean, come on, look at that, eh? But the point is, I'm in no pain with my hip. And this is, I wouldn't say this is 70% better than it was. It's probably 500% better than what it was.
Okay.
So,
because what is your external hip rotation here? So what is that? What's the restriction? What is restricting your ability to turn that hip out?
Well, I think the biggest restrictor is probably going to be soft tissue, in all honesty. So where you have the hip socket, and then you have the head of the femur that sits in there. Now, okay, there are anatomical variants where the socket might be deeper. Some people like myself, so the head of my femur is actually slightly flat shape, and I know that because I've had numerous x-rays of it. But the point is, how that hip moves, see, it's meant to be the shoulder of the lower limb, so it's the same kind of configuration. So it's meant to be a very mobile joint. However, most of us don't have that ability because, of course, the whole thing here is covered in hip joint capsule. It's a collection of thick ligaments, fibrous bands, that kind of thing that holds it together. And then, of course, you start adding layers of musculature. So most of us, especially men, I seem to spend most of my time talking to men about hips, which is fair enough. It's just a very important thing. But yeah, a lot of us, we, because of what we nowadays do, we don't ever take the hip to its extremes of range of motion.
Okay.
And hence, gradually over time it dwindles.
Yeah, sure.
And that kind of starts already, nowadays, it already starts in childhood. Because kids are not as active in a variety of ways than what they used to be. Nowadays, tree climbing is considered bad, right? You get told off if you take your kids tree climbing.
Yeah.
So I get told off a lot, but I don't mind. But the point is, when you don't expose that hip joint to that full range of motion, if you're in a typical day job, you walk around a bit, you sit at the desk, you drive, and that's kind of the variety. It's a very narrow little window that your hip actually occupies.
I see what you're saying, but to do lotus, you need way more than the regular range of motion, which is probably about 60, 70, based on things that I've noticed over my time. I think when I studied first, it said you've got about 50 or 60, I don't remember. But to do lotus, it looks like you need well over 90.
Probably.
So, can you get that extra? So if 60 or 70 is your range, I can do that easily.
Yeah.
Can I go any further than that? That's my...
Well, I suppose if it's a priority for you, it just takes a long time.
Sure, but you still think it's possible?
I think it's possible.
Okay.
I mean, you see contortionists in circuses and things like that, right? You see very advanced yoga teachers who can do all these different wonderful things, right? And
isn't that down to some of their anatomy, though? I don't want to take anything off their effort, of course.
No. But I mean, well,
I'm just trying to understand or help people understand that.
I mean, I think, I think most people should be able to, with hard work and dedication, get to a lotus position.
No, Mika, that's not what I want to hear. I want you to make me feel better and tell me it's never going to happen, so I can just put it away.
So here with your hips, sorry, mate, you are out of luck.
I'm a lost cause anyway. Yeah, sure.
No, but in all honesty, though, if it's a priority for you, if you want to dedicate your life to sitting in a lotus position, saying Om a lot, wearing orange robes, and maybe that kind of thing. You get there.
You could be that guy.
Yeah, no, I don't fancy it. I've got other things to do, in all honesty. But you and me have lives. We don't have like 5 hours a day to dedicate to this kind of
So that's the kind of, it's like an athlete who wants to run quicker or throw better. Masses amount of almost obsession is needed to, and that's the same for lotus.
Right. Well, you look at gymnasts, for example. Absolute consummate athletes. I mean, both of my daughters, they go to gymnastics locally, and I get to go and watch them, which is brilliant. And I look at their conditioning drills and their stretches and this and that, and I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, I would break in half if I tried to do that like now. And of course, they are young. They're very adaptable as it goes, and it's but the progress is gradual. And because my girls are very into it, so they come home and they practice every day. It's almost like every day is a bit of a gymnastics class at home. So they're doing their back bends and they're climbing on the sofa and crawling under the this and that and whatever. That's what they do because they love it. Same as you have your javelin throwers or whatever. They love throwing a long stick across the field, so they dedicate a lot of effort into it.
Okay, so that's the kind of effort needed.
Yeah.
I guess because it's yoga, a lot of people think that if you're gentle, it will...
Yeah, so if you turn up to one yoga class a week, I think it's a nice gesture.
Yeah.
But it's not going to achieve anything.
Yeah. If your goal is not just to get away from the kids, if it's to progress in the poses.
Yeah, exactly. So there's I think you know about the 10,000 hour rule, right? If you put 10,000 hours of quality practice into doing anything, you'll be world class.
Yeah, sure.
Right? That's the theory. So if you think about it, you start practicing now. You practice 8 hours a day, your lotus position. It will take you probably a couple of years, or whatever. It'll probably be less than 10,000 hours because you have good baseline sort of ability and flexibility already.
Sure.
But if you're stuck as a tree stump, and then you decided, okay, I'm going to dedicate myself to meditation and sitting in a lotus position, it would probably take that long, in all honesty. And be a full-time occupation.
And would you lose some stability of the hip with your newfound mobility? Is there a risk?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I say to people who struggle, I go, that's kind of a good thing, because you need restriction.
Yeah, exactly.
Correct?
Yeah, you need a backstop, don't you?
Yeah.
Because if you just all of a sudden you become completely floppy, you'd be very good at doing certain yoga poses, but you'd be rubbish at playing tennis.
And you're more like, if you don't have this stability, you're more likely to hurt yourself doing random things around the house.
Yeah, you bend down to put things into the dishwasher.
And your knee goes whoosh.
Yeah, or the hip pops out, or shoulder dislocates, or because there's just so much laxity.
Yeah.
So that again, when it comes to what we talked about earlier, the athletic diamond and variety and this and that. So the progress is going to be slow if you do it smart. You can probably just spend the next 5 weeks in a lotus position, and you'll be able to do the lotus position really well. But don't try and walk, because that would be very alien at that point.
So that you have to, like with everything, you're going to lose some aspect of your athletic diamond and to increase another aspect of it potentially.
Well, only if you're looking for short-term gains and changes.
Sure. But really, someone said to me, Zahir, why can't you do lotus? I said, because I don't practice it. And they were like, why not? I said, I don't need to.
Yeah.
Because
there you go. It's not a priority for you.
Exactly. It serves, for me, with what I'm working on, it serves no real purpose for me to try. So the time that I have in a day dedicated to my body is better spent doing things more important. When they dwindle and I'm bored, then I can work on lotus.
Yeah,
but the thing I guess I would like my students to understand is that if you can't do lotus, it's fine to have it as a goal, but also physically we don't need to do lotus, as in we don't actually need 90 to 100 degrees external rotation.
No, in your day-to-day life, no, you don't.
So it helps you look like a yogi in a yoga
class.
class.
On, man. It looks brilliant on Instagram.
Exactly.
That's the thing. It's a vanity thing.
In terms of real life, it doesn't, because some yoga poses can assist us.
Yeah.
Some yoga poses, if you can't do triangle properly and you get in, it can help you with certain movements in everyday life. But
absolutely.
But lotus doesn't.
No, it's a very non-functional pose.
Yeah,
is it?
sure.
One thing I would say though.
Non-functional. I've always liked you, Mika. I feel a lot better about myself now. That's why I picked you.
It's redundant, one might say. It won't make you evolve into a higher being. Being able to do lotus.
Well, actually, it might.
But you know what? You see, if you wanted to practice a bit of lotus, next time you're binging on Bollywood films, sit in lotus and watch it.
Oh, I've tried being that guy. Laura had to drag me up the stairs. It's painful.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
it's a bit too much, a bit too soon, isn't it?
So there's a lot of information going around the yoga world at the moment with yoga anatomists and anatomy geeks, etc., talking about the problems that you face with your SI joint and SI joint pain in yoga. It's a buzzword similar to your psoas a couple of years ago. Everything was about your psoas, and now there's always, with anatomy, there's always a kind of something which is fashionable to talk about and discuss. And I'm not saying that SI joint isn't a fashionable part of the body, but the SI joint, so people know, is your sacrum and iliac crest, which form to create.
Oh, let's bring Harry out.
Oh, there he is.
So there we go. So sacroiliac joint is this one here.
Yeah,
the joint between the sacrum and the ilium, right there.
Okay, and so that movement is called nutation, correct?
No. Sacrum nutates back and forth.
Okay.
So the ilium rotates around the sacrum.
Okay.
And it does all sorts of other things as well, by the way.
So based on what you've just shown us, what movements in yoga, I'm thinking already like an upward facing dog, etc. If your sacrum is going one way and your pelvis is trying to go the other way, where is it at risk potentially? Well, potentially, because if you have enough strength, you can withstand it anyway.
No, sure. But see, the thing is with what causes issues around the sacroiliac joints actually is very rarely the sacroiliac joint itself. See, we kind of have to come back to the hip again, because you've got to remember, hip actually sits in there. Now, if your hip joint is not mobile and you start doing whether it's adductor or abductor stretching, your rotations through the hip, if you lack in the mobility here, your body will compensate to the closest possible place, which happens to be in the sacroiliac joint. So, of course, certain things in our day-to-day life, they will, I would hate to say weaken, but they put the sacroiliac joint under more strain, which therefore when you go to a yoga class and you reach the end of your hip mobility, these muscles that protect your sacroiliac joints, they're already like fatigued, so they can't withstand it. That's why accidents happen towards the end of the session, when you're already fatigued and your form is going. So then these sacroiliac joints can sprain.
Okay.
Right? And it's the same, I suppose, across the sport, any sport. It's not just yoga. But see, the typical thing is that you have a rotation that happens either backwards or forwards. That's why we get different length legs. That's why people come and see me, and then I say, oh, did you know your right leg is 5 millimeters shorter than your left? And they go, huh? What does that mean?
Okay.
But actually it's because of the rotation that happens in here.
Okay.
Now, so if you talk to medical people, well, some older medical people, they'll say that sacroiliac joints have no movement at all, which is a bit weird. But the point is, it has a lot of movement. So that rotation is one. Then you have this kind of internal external rotation like so as well, that can
which
happen.
Is why people, if you try to remember to your last yoga class, Mika, I know it was a long time ago, but if you Warrior 2, where you step back with your right foot and turn your foot out, people often complain about real pain, and they don't know they're sacroiliac, but you can, because what they're doing is they're trying to turn their hip too far out.
Yes.
They're trying to get it all, like well over 90 degrees.
That's right.
And then I've experienced something similar, and as soon as I ease off, pain's gone.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to do.
That's basically, that's what's happening then.
Okay.
So you're creating, see the pelvis is a construction, it's basically a ring. So you got the sacrum here at the back, of course, you got the ilia here that form the front of the ring, with the pubic symphysis on the front. Now, if you're rotating that, because you can't lose contact, otherwise that means dislocated joint. Whether it's pubic symphysis would be absolutely horrible. It's so painful I couldn't even imagine. And probably the same would happen here in the sacroiliac. So the whole thing moves as a unit, right? So it does this. Now, so depending on where the hip restrictions are, which side or even both sides, that will then influence again the sacral position. So the sacrum is, for example, if it's a bit rotated that way, so it's more prominent on this left-hand side here.
Okay.
Now all of a sudden that joint tends to jam up, which causes this side to lose a little bit of contact. So all of a sudden that side becomes hypermobile.
Sure.
Right? So that's why that leg is more likely to be short when I look at these patients. And that also is why a lot of people then have tightness in the buttock muscles, glutes piriformis on this side. Oftentimes that comes with the psoas as well, the iliacus down here. All those muscles, they kind of clench up because they're trying to protect the integrity of that joint. And of course then going to the extremes of motion is not a good idea because you have an unstable joint. And what I have to do with people oftentimes is actually correct the sacral position first, get that nice and square, which allows these joints to approximate properly anyways, which takes a lot of the tightness away from the glutes and the stabilizes. And that's when we've got to get to work with the hips.
And so, coming off track for yoga slightly, just thinking about what you do for a living, essentially what you try to do is, if you reset people back and put their bones back where they were designed to be, the body will try and heal itself. But the body doesn't heal itself if it recognizes that there is a misalignment of the structure. Is that correct?
I think that's correct, yeah. In essence, yeah, that's correct. See, that's why you have these people who pick up one injury after another. So they never get the original injury or even the first few sorted. So, they become asymptomatic over time. They are no longer in pain. But what happens is that the body still recognizes that it's not operating factory settings.
Okay.
So hence, you are by default, you are compensating your movement patterns, you're utilizing your muscles incorrectly, if you like, or inefficiently, whatever is the word. And that then leads to other injuries down the line.
So your job really is like, it really should be thought of as MOT for the body.
Yeah.
If you put things back where they were and check everything, the body will try to heal itself over time.
No, it won't try. It will.
It will.
No, it will. See, that's the fun beauty of your brain. It will heal you to 100% if you let it.
Okay, if you create the right conditions.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, I half jokingly say to people, you know, I restore factory settings for a living. That's what I do.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
So anyone with the regular, consistent yoga injuries, they're generally related to a kind of sacrum, lower back, and shoulders. If they can find a way to not stop doing what they're doing, but find a way to not stress that part, and then get the body reset, the brain will try to heal the body.
The brain will do it.
And if it's still hurting you 6 months down the line, it's because you haven't addressed
the underlying cause.
The underlying cause.
That's right.
Okay.
And sometimes the underlying cause can be obscure.
Yeah, sure.
You know, it can be all resulting from an ankle sprain in childhood, school days. I mean, that could be the root of all bad and evil, if you like. And everything that's happened since has just been your body trying to figure out a way around that ankle injury, and then that turned into knee injury, and then a bit of a hip niggle, and then the low back blew up, and then next thing you know, your shoulders are tense, and neck is all crunched up, and that's where you get a headache. And
yeah.
So
I
bit
guess
by bit, it will track up.
I guess now it's taken me so long to understand the quote by that the guy who developed osteopathy. I've forgotten his name now, but he said structural integrity equals physiological and psychological function. So that's what you're doing. You're trying to help us regain the integrity of our spine, so we can have our function back the way it should be.
Exactly.
Because we all know how much it affects us when we're injured.
Oh, totally, man. No, do you know what? Our biochemistry teacher back in the day, he put it beautifully. He said that structure defines function, and function defines symptomology. Or lack of function, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
But the point is, if you have aberrant structure, that means aberrant function, and that means the alarm bells will start ringing in your brain. That's when it switches off, switches on all these different ways to catch your attention.
And is that part of the problem with anyone who does something that they love, ignoring the pain?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, we all do it.
We all do it. Of course we do it.
It's just about recognizing at some stage, we need to see a professional like yourself rather than... Because it's funny, because yoga has this idiotic mindset that if you've hurt yourself, the solution you can find in another yoga pose.
Well, do you know what? That's, as far as it goes, that's not entirely incorrect, because I would say that everything I do to patients, for example, they can do to themselves with movement or through movement, but it takes a hell of a long time, and you have to really be able to pinpoint what the problem is and how to do it.
Okay.
And so I met a guy a while ago who had an SI problem, and he said it took him 9 months to work on it daily, on his own, just through movement. I mean, he wasn't pleased when I said I could have fixed it for him in 3 minutes, but he had to try it.
Yeah.
And that's all cool, man. So we all get there in the end one way or the other.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I do is kind of a shortcut.
Sure. And I guess the other thing is that what I found is if you've hurt yourself in yoga, you've hurt yourself doing something very specific, and the problem is that you continue to do that very specific.
Yeah, exactly.
That's, I guess, why
you keep reiterating it.
Yeah, you keep
reiterating it.
At it. But that is the hardest thing for us to do, isn't it? Step away from the activity that we love, even for a day or two. Desensitize the pain. It's very difficult.
Absolutely, and that's also if your livelihood is depending on it, of course, then you feel like there's an obligation to keep doing it day in, day out as well.
Yeah.
And I totally get that. I respect that. But again, if you're injured, it's not going to look very good when you rock up at a yoga class and go, do you know what, you'll do that pose, I'm not going to do it today because I'm a bit injured.
Man, it sounds like every yoga class of mine.
Yeah. I wasn't gonna go there, but it's fair enough. Or even if you're kind of groaning through it.
I see what you mean, because it's like when you're on an aeroplane and they say first you have to give yourself oxygen before you. And I guess it's the same with us. Like yoga teachers, not everyone, because you know how I feel about yoga teachers, but there are a lot of us.
You love them.
There are a lot of us who are genuinely trying to help others,
yes.
and we want the best for them. We want them to feel better, and I guess the only way to achieve that is first we have to try and look after ourselves.
That's it, man. Absolutely. I mean, that's something I do as well. You know, when I come up with or I find something new, whether it's to do with training or treatment or nutrition, whatever, I always try it on myself first.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm my own test dummy, right?
Yeah.
So I test everything. If it all checks out, it has the intended effect and no sort of unwanted side effects, then I recommend it to people. I say, okay, you know what, give that a bash, see how you get on, and let me know. And if it still checks out, then I can kind of recommend it to everybody.
Yeah.
So, you know, everything I recommend to people, I've already tested.
Yeah. On a final note, not that I want to run you out of business, but I recall you saying that if everyone learned how to like lift their chest, you might be out of work. You didn't say it in so many words.
No, I didn't say it exactly like that, I don't think. But you know what, yeah, if you learn to stand up tall, which therefore has a massive effect connotation across the board, where it comes to breathing, it comes to your heart rate, it comes to your hormonal balance, digestion, sleep quality, everything. Yeah, I would have fewer people in horrible agony come to see me. Is our thoracic,
I know it has the least amount of movement except rotation, like flexion, extension, relative to the others. Why are we so collapsed through it? Is it gravity, occupation, combination?
Well, it kind of starts in teenage years, I think. Nowadays, even older, or younger, sorry, because people are just spending a lot of time doing this.
Yeah, sure.
You know, whether it's that, or whether it's this, or...
That's how my nephew sits on his iPad.
Drawing, or reading, or, you know, driving is the same. You go to eat, you know, you do the same thing. So all of us have this way of just collapsing through the chest. And people say, oh, I just feel comfortable like that. And I tell them to sit up and straighten out. And they're so conditioned into it that it feels alien to actually be upright. Right?
And is the risk also that our activities, our sports, can be very push dominant as well?
Yeah.
And so the part of your body which is already like tense or restricted gets tighter and tighter.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, you know, it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't discern where the stimulation comes from. A stimulus is a stimulus. It's non-specific in that sense. So if you spend all your day at the desk, then you spend all your time eating and driving like that, and you go and play hockey, which I like hockey, don't get me wrong, but if you're still doing, you know, you're in a bent forward position, it just adds to the same pattern, right?
Yeah, absolutely right.
So when your flexor compartment in the front is so tense, your extensors kind of almost give up. They just go, well, you know, we can't compete.
That's a really interesting point, because I can get people to stand up with their chest up in mountain when we start, remind them of what they're trying to do, and then the very next pose they might go back and they create the pose from their default position.
Yeah, exactly. That's the power of habit. That's the power of habit, because it's so ingrained in us nowadays to be just like that.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, you know, because like sometimes if I do movement seminars and that, or workshops and stuff, you know, I get people to just stand around, mill around aimlessly for a while, and I say, okay, who's got pain? And oftentimes people put their hand up and say, you know, they have pain here and there. I say, okay, right, well, let's get you to stand up tall. So I teach them how to stand up straight, and I leave them to it for about a minute. I'll just let it be, and I say, okay, how many people have pain now? Every single hand in the audience goes up, because they're uncomfortable being upright.
Yeah, wow.
As weird as that may be, but the point is, you know, we've
lost it.
It's not the default setting. It's not where your body naturally wants to go.
It's interesting because Dr. Stuart McGill, he gets people who are rounded to stand up, and he says, now, I've just given you the world's cheapest painkiller.
Yes.
Stand up.
Yeah.
And, you know, the distribution of weight, if it's even, you shouldn't feel any discomfort, correct?
No, that's right. But then again, now we're looking at also the soft tissue adhesions, tightness, you know, when it comes to muscles, fascia, ligaments, all that kind of stuff. Because if they're conditioned into being in that position, and then you go into here, it's just going to feel alien.
And it affects
not necessarily bad, but different.
Yeah, and that's why breathing in yoga is so difficult, because we're trying to breathe. And the interesting thing is most of us are like this, and then you're told to rest in a yoga class like this in a child's pose, and you continue. So even when you're recovering, rather than being, you're back to where you were. So it is based on what you've said, it's a massive problem, because first you said teenagers, and then you thought about it and you were like, no, actually it's younger.
Now it's younger.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we're finding it near impossible. I mean, this is going to be the norm soon, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We're all going to end up these non-shouldered, sort of non-chested people who just like waddle along. Do you know a funny thing? I've been conducting this little experiment in clinic for a few years now, and every time I see a new patient, I ask them to take a deep breath in. Go on, take a deep breath in. Yeah, exactly. Every single patient
I know that
does
because you've already got me with it before.
Yeah, I know. But every single patient does that. Every single one of them. Not one of them comes in and goes. And it's scary.
And why is that we're breathing that way? Without complicating it.
Well, it's bad habit, I think. See, as a child, as a baby, that's where you used to breathe. You used to use your diaphragm, which is designed for the job. You know, the hand's belly would go in and out, and you were not self-conscious about it. Then at some point, maybe it's self-consciousness, maybe it's an injury here, or just a permanent thing where the diaphragm tightens up, and the next thing you know, it's just... And nobody ever tells you that it's wrong. Or nobody ever tells you that there's a different way. Which is, it's a crying shame, really, because it can make such a difference in people's lives, just to learn to breathe better.
Wow. Well, Mika,
cool, man.
That's been fascinating.
Awesome.
It really has. It really has. Once we've progressed, I hope we can have an additional catch up. And
definitely.
Some of you are hopefully, once I arrange a date with Mika, we'll meet him at the studio for the teacher training anyhow. Mika, always a pleasure, my man.
Good stuff, man.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
That was great, mate. Thanks, man.
Cheers, man. No, it's been fun.
That was really good.
It's fun to have a little nap.
Yeah, they'll love that.
Yeah. But you know what, we're going to have to vacate because